During this demo, I'm going to show you how easy it is to scan a document in FlexiCapture, extract information from that document, and then pass that information along with the scanned image into the Laserfiche repository. We're then going to make a modification by changing what information we pass to Laserfiche, and show you how easy that is to do with the XML configuration file. The first application we're going to run is the FlexiCapture scanning station. FlexiCapture allows you to spread various functions across multiple workstations and multiple people. Now in this particular instance we don't have a scanner attached to the workstation, so I'm going to simply import images from a directory, although the actual experience that the user sees is exactly the same. So we can see that if we go and click on Scan Pages, we're going to actually import a total of 7 images. Those images make up approximately 3 invoices. If we go and look at the first page of the first invoice, we can in fact see the information contained. Now FlexiCapture is in fact going to extract a lot more information than we're actually going to use. This information very often will be integrated and passed to an ERP system, but for the purposes of this demonstration we're only going to use 2 discrete fields. Those fields are the invoice number and the invoice date. Now later on in the demo I'm going to modify it to also include the total, which is in fact located on page 2, as you can see here. So now we're going to select Send to FlexiCapture, which is going to take this batch and send it to FlexiCapture for processing. Now you'll also note that the FlexiCapture batch number is 35. In fact, we called the batch here Laserfiche Demo 35. That's important because we're going to use that batch number later on as the folder name in Laserfiche where the documents are going to be placed. So we'll select Send to FlexiCapture and we'll see that the icons will actually change colour to show that they've actually been sent. And once all the documents have been sent, the batch is then removed from the interface. So if we now look at the various tasks going on, we can see that in fact in the background we've got a bunch of things actually happening. We're exporting the documents, and in fact if I click on refresh we'll see that we're pre-processing and recognizing the pages. Once this has been completed, we can then move on to the next stage of the process. Now obviously in this case I'm running everything on a single PC, so this will take a little bit longer. If we'd spread the load across the various workstations as would typically be the case in an enterprise deployment, then obviously this would take next to no time at all. So now those tasks are complete. If we open up the verification interface, we'll actually see, when we hit refresh, that there's a verification task that needs to be processed. So I'm going to open up that task and we can see that sure enough there are the invoices that we saw earlier, and we can see each of the individual pages. If I go click on one of those, it'll actually open up an interface that shows us what information we've actually extracted. We can see that in fact we have the vendor information. You can see that each of these fields is being highlighted on the right hand side of the screen. The 2 fields that we're interested in for the purposes of this demo, specifically invoice number and indeed invoice date, we can see that in fact those are also being highlighted in yellow. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to change this process later on in the demonstration to include the total amount, and if I click on that we can see that we automatically go to the right page on the second page of the invoice, which shows us the total at the bottom. Now in this particular instance we've viewed all the documents, we've verified all the information, but in reality the confidence level was very high. We can see that in fact the confidence level here was 100% for all of the invoices. So in that particular case we probably wouldn't really need to do verification. So this task would only ever be done if there is some kind of discrepancy or the confidence level is below a certain threshold. So now we'll click on Close Task and move on to the next stage of the process, which is now taking the images and the extracted information and passing that across to Laserfiche. So if we hit Close Task now and we go back to our monitoring screen, we'll see that there'll actually be some additional things being done. So we can see that there's an Exporting Documents task that's currently underway. And in fact, if we go to the Laserfiche interface, we'll actually see that in fact we've already created the Laserfiche demo folder. And in that folder we can see that in fact there are the 3 invoices. And if I had to open up one of those, we'll in fact see not only the image but also the extracted information. So we can see, sure enough, there is the invoice number and the invoice date. Now, also note that the total field is empty because we haven't configured the connector to take this information that's available in FlexiCapture and actually make it available in Laserfiche. So now we're going to make a modification to the connector, rerun exactly the same demo, and see that the results in fact are indeed changed. So we'll come out of here, we'll minimize this interface, and we'll actually open up the connector, or more specifically the configuration file for the connector, which is actually just simply an XML file. And we can see that in fact the most important part of the XML file is down here, and I'll actually highlight it, where we can see that there are two fields, actually two field pairs. The first refers to the invoice number. This is the field inside of FlexiCapture, and then the invoice number field down here is in fact the field name that we want to map it to. Now in this particular instance they're exactly the same, but they don't have to be. The second field that we're interested in is invoice date, and here is the name in FlexiCapture, and here is the name inside of Laserfiche. Now I've already commented out the necessary fields that we need to add, so I'm going to uncomment out those fields, and in fact sure enough now we can see that we're using the total field in FlexiCapture and the total field in Laserfiche. So now we're going to simply save that configuration file, close that around, and now we're going to run the demo exactly the same as we did before. So again, we open up the FlexiCapture scan station. We are going to scan the documents once more. And in this particular instance, the images are exactly the same, but it wouldn't matter if they were different images or indeed different layouts, because the system is smart enough to realize that those layouts are different. So now we're going to send to FlexiCapture. We'll go back to the task manager, and we can see that in fact if I refresh, we're going to see some additional tasks. So we're pre-processing the documents once more. And once those tasks are complete, we'll then go across to verification and verify that the information has been extracted again. Now up to this point, nothing has changed as far as FlexiCapture is concerned. So sure enough, now we're recognizing the pages, and once that's been complete, we'll move across to the verification interface. So if we go to verification, we click on refresh. Sure enough, there is a task. We'll open it up again, and as before, like I said, we haven't changed FlexiCapture in any way. The only thing that's changed is the connector, and the connector doesn't come into play until we've actually processed this particular batch. So I'm now going to close the task, and that's now going to invoke the connector, which is in turn going to kick off the creation of a field, a folder, and in fact it's already done that. So we can see Laserfiche demo 36 has been created. If we open that up, we can see sure enough there are the fields, the images rather. And if I now open up the invoice, we're going to see something very interesting. We're going to see the fact that yes, we have the invoice number, yes, we have the invoice date, but now we also have the value which was on the second page, which is the total of the invoice. So what we've demonstrated here is the ability for the connector to rapidly make a change to the information that we're pulling from FlexiCapture to Laserfiche. And what's important here is we haven't had to do anything different in Laserfiche. We haven't had to do anything different in FlexiCapture. The documents classes are set up exactly the same, the capturing is set up exactly the same, but what the connector provides is a linkage between those two, and a very flexible linkage which allows us to make changes very quickly, both in terms of making changes to a system that's already in production, but most importantly rapidly getting a system up into production by making it very easy to link both the capture and the content repository that Laserfiche represents.